Hello friends and welcome to Unit 1 Lesson 5 which is on industrial policy. Just let me have a quick review of what we have done so far. We started with understanding the business environment and its various components in Lesson 1. Lesson 2 we talked about political environment, and then continuing with Lesson 3 we talked specifically about government intervention. Lesson 4 was on economic environment. And under that, we discussed three things. One was economic system. Second, we talked about the economic policies, which we are going to do now. We also discussed economic conditions. So economic system, economic conditions, we discussed in lesson 4. And now let us talk about the economic policies, which started as industrial policies. The learning outcomes are industrial policies of India after independence starting from 1947. Then there was a major shift in 1991 when what we call even today is the new economic policy or new industrial policy. And there were three components of this policy, which we call as LPG, which is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And that changed the entire scenario of India in the global economy. And then we'll look at the economic performance as our last learning objective. Okay, let us start with all the industrial policies of India after we got independence from the Britishers. Now, when we got independence, there were four major things which the government was looking at. Number one, there was a lot of dumping which was happening in India. Second, that the government wanted that we should use our resources effectively and efficiently. And also we should be able to deliver the maximum value. Third, we need to invest in building the infrastructure, and they have to be completed well in time so that we can reap the benefits out of that built infrastructure. Number four, since our population was very high, still is very high, we wanted labor-intensive industry. So these were the four challenges that we faced when we got the independence. So with that background, the government started with the independent industrial policy of Free India, the first one which came as Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948. After that, we had the second policy which came in 1956, and then we had the third one in 1973. The fourth one came in 1977. If you see from 56 to 73, that's a long period. So we were continuing with that policy because it takes time to do all the implementation that you had planned for. So the fourth policy came in 1977, and then we had the fifth policy which came in 1980. And the one which changed the course of this country, which you are reaping in, which you are taking benefit of even today, is the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1991. Now let us go into the details of these policies. What was the objective with which these policies were framed, and how we have changed the direction after independence till today. So we can divide this, the whole time from 1948 till now, into three eras. I'll call this as pre-liberalization up to 1980. That is, from 1948 to 1980, we call it pre-liberalization. And after that, from 1948 to 1990 is the pre-liberalization. From 1991 to 2011, we call it post-liberalization. And from 2011 We are continuing with the post-liberalization era, but we also had come up with a new industrial policy in 2011. So we'll talk about that. So when we came up with our first industrial policy in 1948, as I said, it was for the independent India, and we wanted to protect the country from invasions from outside, as we had been ruled by Britishers for so many years. So that was one. Second, we wanted to have the public sector taking up all the infrastructural projects and a very strong public sector who work for the welfare of the people. And third was we wanted to set the regulations in place for the businesses to work in India. So we framed the policy around these three things. Then in 1973, since we thought that the infrastructure building is very important, we wanted to continue that direction. So we prioritized some sectors which we call as the priority industries. We identified them, and then we also allowed foreign investment in these priority areas. 1977, when we came up with the fourth industrial policy, we concentrated on decentralization. So that means we wanted more private sector, and also to the state level we wanted to give more autonomy, and we wanted that since most of the population was in the rural areas, so we wanted to encourage the small scale and cottage industry specifically. So the focus of industrial policy in 1977 was more rural small scale cottage industry and also more decentralization. And in 1991, early 1991, India faced a big challenge. India's economy got shattered. We didn't have enough money, enough reserves, and we were in a very bad state. And this 1991 industrial policy, which earlier it used to be the production only, so that is why we used to call industrial policy, but we call it new economic policy. We also can call it new industrial policy, which came in 1991. We'll talk in detail about that. That changed the direction of India, and India started progressing on a different tangent. So that is the period when we say post-liberalization. But let me also talk about 1980. 1980, we wanted the quality of the gross product, all the products that we are making in the country, the quality should be good. So we tried to promote the competition within the domestic market, and we wanted the latest technology to be used, and we wanted all our production units to be modernized. As I said, 1991, it was the time when we opened up the economy, we liberated the economy, we wanted the private businesses to take the initiative. So we had a lot of reforms for the first time after 1948, and we took a lot of decisions which were in favor of the business. So we abolished the license Raj, and the public sector which was not doing well, we tried to contract them. That means we want to either stop them or reduce their size. And we wanted more foreign direct investment in a lot of sectors so as to grow. When we talk about 2011, we had our national manufacturing policy. So this was not industrial policy. We came up with a new national manufacturing policy, which was a roadmap to create a lot of jobs in the manufacturing industry. And we wanted that the industry should contribute more to the national GDP, and also we simplified some of the regulations for doing business in India, and we wanted ease of doing business in India. Our rank should improve, and also in terms of again emphasizing on world-class infrastructure and the best technology that we wanted. We also looked at the environment and we wanted greener technologies to be adopted in India. So let us now talk about 1991 industrial policy, which even today we call it new industrial policy, because it was altogether very different. So let me talk about the early months of 1991. As I said, India was in a very bad shape. It is like you have used all your saved resources and you are begging to the IMF and the World Bank to give you more money so that you can run your country. So if you, in terms of the figures, our foreign exchange reserves were as low as 2,400 crores, which is just to buy from the world market for the next 3 weeks, because no one is going to give us anything more than that, because they always look at your reserves. Also, the inflation was at all-time high, 13.5. So it was almost touching 14 and a half, which is very, very high. So that was the time when Congress was in power, and there was one prime minister who had no idea of economy. His background was not from economics. He was Mr. Narasimha Rao, and he used to be the CM of Andhra Pradesh. And then another finance minister was picked who had no knowledge of politics. He had no background of politics. He was a professor of economics, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And you know both of them very well. So that was the time when this new policy came. So if we talk about this new policy, it had three legs, three branches, which we call as LPG: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. When we talk about liberalization, as we discussed, they opened up the private sector and they removed the licensing, Raj, which we call today. That means you can produce anything, you don't have to come to get a license to increase your production or start producing a new product. That was one of the things, and they also looked at a lot of other things which they stopped in terms of government intervention. They gave a lot of leverage to the private business houses. Privatization, as I said, they saw that the effective usage of resources and efficiency of the public sector was not there, and contribution to the GDP was very low. So the performance of public sector was looked at, and they wanted to privatize and they wanted to close down the SIC units, the public sector units. So that was when they advocated privatization. And third was globalization. They wanted to open the economy to the world, and they wanted business houses from other countries and the investors to come and invest in India. So they relaxed a lot of norms towards that. So on the three fronts, they opened up liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So that means all the doors were open, and this was in 1991. The objectives they used were six. Number one, as I said, attainment of international competitiveness, development of backward areas, that means integrate the rural and urban areas to grow together, encouraging competition within the Indian industry to improve the quality, efficient use of productive resources, full utilization of all the capacities which were there in our country, also uh, so that the employment is generated and there is less of unemployment and poverty. And number six is all the weak units, whether in the public sector or private sector, to revive those. If still they are not performing, to sell them off and do more privatization. So that was basically the aim. And two things which were very prominent during this policy was, one is de-licensing. Let us understand what is licensing. You might have seen the movie Guru, which is on Dhirubhai Ambani, and in that, if you want to increase the production, if you want to produce more units, since Dhirubhai Ambani was in textile industry, so you have to take permission from the government to increase the quota of production. So that is what you want to start a new business, you have to go to the government to get a license. So it was licensing time. So what the government did in 1991, they abolished the industrial licensing for almost all industries except 18 industries. And some of the examples where they have kept the control or licensing there for to be in the hands of the government, the industries were coal, petroleum, sugar, animal fat, leather, wood-based products. So over a period of time, they even licensing requirements from the 18 industries were reduced to only 5 industries. So these 5 which you will be willing to know: alcohol, cigarettes, chemicals, aerospace and defense equipment, and explosives. So for the de-licensed industries, there was no government interference. Anyone can do anything except as long as it is as per the regulations, not licensing, but as per the criteria laid down by the government, and also keeping the environment safe. The other part was the foreign direct investment. As we said, globalization was one of the legs of NIP. So foreign direct investment was allowed up to 51%. So if it is more than 50, the ownership goes to the investor who has a stake of 51%. And it was made very easy for high technology firms where they were transferring the latest technology to run the show in India. So FDI was allowed in capital goods, metallurgical, electronics and food processing industries. So from 2016, they even abolished Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB, we call it, Foreign Investment Promotion Board. What was its role? It was a single window which used to advise the government whether the foreign investment should be there in a particular sector. So now the individual departments of the government, they have the freedom to decide on foreign investment. So at present, FDI is allowed up to 100% in large number of industries. So from a protected economy to a globalized economy, that is how things have moved. So what were the positives if we want to evaluate the new industrial policy? 6 positives. So what you see today, we have a very competitive industry. There is a freedom to the business houses, to the entrepreneurs to start any business, and the norms are very liberalized. The public sector has started performing. Those who still can't perform, like you saw the merger of banks in the private sector, many of the SIC units have been closed, they have been sold to the private sector. So These were the four. The fifth one is, so with the globalization, we have been integrating our business houses with the world economy, and we have opened up the economy for others to come to India and do their business here. So if we want to look at the state-wise GDP from 1991, when this new industrial policy came till around 2015, so you will see the number of times the GDP has increased in different states. So if I look at Himachal, around 38.9 times the GDP has increased from 91 to 2015. So if I look at Haryana, it is 26.6, Delhi 30.3, Gujarat 29, right? Goa is 36.6. So if you look at Himachal, they have gained the most. Punjab 15.3, Bihar and Uttarakhand 20.3, Assam 15.5, West Bengal 19.8, UP and Uttarakhand is 17.2. So if I look at the lowest figure, which is Assam, which is 15.5 times, so that is in a way is huge, and no one has done that anywhere in the globe. In 2011, we came up with a national manufacturing policy. So you know that India had been agro-based economy after independence, and agriculture had been contributing a lot towards the GDP of the country. But slowly it is going down, and we wanted the manufacturing to be contributing to the GDP. If you look at countries like China, Japan, Germany, so their manufacturing share is above 25% to the GDP. So India came up with a national manufacturing policy, specifically in 2011, where they kept these 6 objectives. So they wanted to increase the manufacturing sector growth to around 15 in the medium term, and then they wanted that to be around 25% by 2022. But now we are at almost 25 to 27. They wanted to create more, because when the base of manufacturing becomes bigger, so a lot of jobs are created. So 100 million additional jobs the Indian government is looking at by 2022. In the rural areas, they wanted the skill development so that these people are available for the manufacturing units to be set up there. Domestic value and technological advancement in the manufacturing was one of the areas to make it more cost effective and valuable. And we wanted to compete in the global competition, so that Make in India, that was a program launched in 2015. People are associated with that, and this campaign is still on. Lastly, let us look at the economic performance. When we look at the economic performance, so we start from the very beginning, and we take it from 1947 till today. So if you look at 2 things, one is the GDP, which is in blue, and the green one is the average inflation, that is year on year. So after independence, if you look at the period from 62 to 67, so when I say 62 to 67, that is this period, this was when we were in war with China. So this is where our GDP was at its lowest, because all the concentration was to save our country from China. After that, if you look, you see, if I reach this 1991, so if you look at the GDP, it is almost going up. So this was the time when India was in a very bad shape, but after that it has been doing well. If I look at inflation for 1 year, when the NDA was there for 1 year, the political parties, they have a National Democratic Front, which was a coalition government. So inflation was very, very high. But then subsequent governments have worked hard to look at the GDP, and inflation has been kept below the GDP. Like here, the inflation is more than the GDP. Inflation is under control. A lot of inflation. This was the time I was talking, and you can see. So here, you see we were comfortable. So you are having the best time, except when the COVID started. So let me summarize the things. We talked about the economic policies of India. We talked in detail about the national industrial policy, or our new economic policy. Then we talked about our new manufacturing policy, which came out in 2011. We also looked at the economic performance after independence till date. Here is a small quiz, so I hope you'll be able to answer all the questions. They are just simple. If you have been listening to this session, you'll be able to answer it. What does LPG means in new industrial policy? Which year was Make in India planned? What was the inflation rate in early 1991? So please check your answers here. So LPG stands for liberalization, privatization and globalization. Make in India, it was formulated in 2015, and the inflation rate in 1991 was around 13.5%. Well friends, if you have any questions, feel free to write to me at gsinggjimt@gmail.com, and I'll respond to your mail as quickly as possible. Lastly, I want you to go through these two good articles. Number one is 25 years of reforms by PM with zero knowledge, what I was talking about at that point of time in 1991, what was happening. And the other one is again the vision of New India. This is by one of the guys who is heading the National Development Council or Skill Development, NSPC. So that is all from my side. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll come back to you with the next lesson very soon. Take care, sleep well, and stay safe. Thank you.